We want to continue our theme, and there's a nice segue from the view is worth the climb to our next presenter, Ed Trolley, who's our Senior Vice President Consulting and Advisory Services, a new practice we just started at the NIIT. Probably 95% of you folks here in the room know of Ed for the past several years. He's going to come up and share practices. By the way, you all know he wrote the book, Running Training Like a Business, best-selling book. So he's going to continue taking us through this theme here at Running Training Like a Business. So Ed, come on up here and take us forward.
Okay. Thank you. I'm bringing my own technology because I don't think I can see that screen. So I'm going to kick this theme off of transformation, the view is worth the climb. Share with you some thoughts that I've kind of developed over the last 20 years of being in this space. The thoughts I developed having experienced personally a major corporate training transformation a lot of years ago. And then having worked with a lot of companies who have taken on the challenge of transforming training and development and delivering more value and running training like a business, by the way. So let's use the internet here for a minute and look at what Wikipedia says about transformation. It's making fundamental changes in how business is conducted in order to help cope with the shift in the market environment. When we think about that in the context of training, there is lots of relevance, which I'll talk about in a minute. But what Wikipedia also says is that business transformation is achieved by realigning how we do our work, by how we use technology. And in fact, transformation is not one of those things you can snap your fingers and have happen. It has to go through a series of phases. And those phases, there are 6 of them. First is recognizing the need. So it's sitting back and saying, hey, you know, am I comfortable in what I'm doing? Are we operating okay or are we not? What's the signals? What's the naive listening you're doing to your customers to try to determine how you're doing and whether you need to transform or not? The second phase is agreeing what the change should be, what form it should take, and the objectives of it. So that you are, in fact, you know, we've talked about this in the past, setting the target and understanding the road that takes you there is really important because there's that old saying, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there, right? So this is about understanding where you want to go and then figuring out the path you're going to take. The third step in this transformation journey is to understand what you're changing from and obviously what you want to go to. And then the fourth phase is designing the new way of working and its support and management. Fifth phase is testing and implementing the changes, usually in waves. So not taking it all on, not making a revolutionary change, but phasing your way in, learning as you go, correcting mistakes, resetting expectations, and those sorts of things. And then lastly is making certain whatever change you've created is so embedded in the organization that you can't go back to the old way. All critically important in this activity that we call transformation. So, why is it something that we ought to be talking about in training and development? Some of you have seen this before, but let me just point you to the left part of this slide and ask you, are you able to answer all those questions on the left side? If you are not able to answer them, and I suspect most of you can't answer them, like, for example, how much are you spending enterprise-wide on training? More importantly, what are you getting for whatever it is you're spending? Those are the 2 key questions that we have to be able to answer for our business executives who are providing us the funding to do what we do. So if you have any of these questions that you can't answer, provide good answers to confidently, then I suggest that there's probably something you need to do to transform the way you're doing the work that you're doing so that you can develop answers to those questions. And of course, we all know that there's a business mandate or business imperative that's coming at us, that's been coming at us for a number of years from the businesses, from the people who are funding our work, saying you got to get your cost to acceptable levels. You got to move fixed cost to variable. I only want to pay for things when I use them. I don't want to get an allocation at the end of the month and then find out that I didn't even use your resources, so I don't deserve that allocation. We need to become more relevant. You got to get connected to what's important to me, not what's important to you. And for certain, we have to figure out how to increase the value from the investment we're getting in training and development. And lastly is focus, of course, on the strategic elements of the business so that we are, in fact, just totally targeted on what's important to our customers. So there's this question of how do I know how much value I am delivering? And that's the most elusive question in our industry. It is the most elusive. And I've heard training leaders, training professionals, NIIT leaders and professionals, and our competitors, leaders and professionals, say, measuring training is too difficult. You can't do it. It costs too much money. It's not measurable. And what I would say to that is the ROI Institute, Jack Phillips, the ROI Institute, in 2009, did a study, and that study said 96% of executives want to see the business impact of what we do, and only 8% receive it today. And 74% want to see the ROI data, and only 4% have it. Now, that's our customer, that's our investor. If we're not responding to those two questions, then I think this whole topic of transformation becomes really real, because without that information, they have difficulty making decisions about where to invest. And when they have difficulty making decisions about where to invest, they put their money where they know there's a return. And if they don't see a return from us, then they take money away from us. Does that make sense, everybody? Is that an experience you've all had? Yeah? I know I had it years ago. But as Sapnesh said earlier, the value we can deliver is exponential. The potential is exponential over the investment. If you look at if you look at that center part, spending 10% of a company's revenue on capital improvement increased productivity by about 4%. Spending the same amount on human capital development doubles the productivity. That's from the University of Pennsylvania. That's a really strong statement. That says for business executives, I got a choice where to put my money. Do I put it in capital expenditures, or do I put it in human capital investment? Right? The return is pretty evident where you should do it. Now, all we have to do then is deliver on the promise. That's our job. Accenture said years ago, a 1% increase in productivity yields more than 10 times the business impact of a 1% reduction in training costs. That's another significant statement, because here's what we know. When times get tough, who's first on the chopping block? It's kind of us, right? Traditionally, it's been that way. Today, it's that way in many organizations. So we have to change this around. That's what this whole idea of transformation is about. We want when times get tough for organizations to put more money into their people, not less. Because if you put more money in, hopefully, you can turn around the tough times to positive times. So, we're not alone in saying this. The industry analysts are finally aligned on what's important in our industry, and all of them are using the word transformation. I don't have it up here, but the Corporate Executive Board late last year published a research report that said that businesses are not satisfied with HR in general. And 8 out of 10 HR organizations need to transform themselves in the next year. Josh Bersin has published 2 times this year. At the beginning of the year in his predictions for 2015, and then just last week in his Global Human Capital Trends report, saying that companies need to transform learning and development. Need to change the way we do it. We need to change the structure. We need to change how we interact with our customers. We need to change how we deliver value. We need to change how we understand what needs are and how we're going to deliver solid, measurable solutions for the value we create. It's going to be a transformational year in corporate talent management and corporate learning. Trainingindustry.com, my good buddy Doug Harward, who's been around this industry for many, many years, says corporate executives and learning leaders alike are going to be looking for ways to transform their organization. And it's about re-engineering what we do. It's not just about changing a little thing. It's not about incremental change. It's about dramatic change. So corporate executives, corporate business executives want change. We've got to respond to it. And that's not a trivial matter. That is a big, big deal. And it's one of those things I think that VJ said. It's one of those things that's easier said than done. And so we have to really, put our shoulder to the thing and make it happen in a big, big way. So I believe that to create transformation, to drive transformation, you have to make a leap all the way out to where you want to go. Where is it? What's my target? And then work your way back in terms of defining the steps to get there. And the reason for that is that there's lots of evidence that says if you try to increment your way to transformation, you never make it. You never get there. That's evidence in the IT industry, in our industry, over the years, proven. You can't increment your way to transformation. You got to make the big jump. So let me put forth at least a semblance of a model, a transformation framework for learning and development. I'm not going to go through each of these. You can read them, but I will say this as kind of a synopsis of it. This is about us repositioning ourselves from a support organization, an overhead, a burden to the business, to a business partner. It's about moving from the back room to the boardroom. It's about us being recognized as deliverers of value, being value creation machines, and doing everything and behaving just like our customers in our businesses behave with their customers. That's the essence of this. It's talk the language of business. It's ask the right questions. It's bring solutions that create value, and it means doing it at acceptable costs, at acceptable time frames. Make sense? Everybody? Yeah? So, you've heard me talk about running training like a business, many of you. The key tenets of running training like a business are effectiveness and efficiency. It means we have to improve the value, that's the effectiveness side, and we have to improve the efficiency, which is the cost side. And what I always say is, it's not about lowest cost. It really isn't about lowest cost. It's about acceptable costs based on the value you're delivering. So, if in fact you are delivering enormous value for investment being made, your company likely is willing to spend more money, not less. So that's the challenge we have. How when times get tough, do we get more investment? We get more investment by creating more value. And on this cost thing, we think it's really important, and we've been saying this in the marketplace for some number of years, that managing the total cost of training is critically important versus just managing the top little triangle, which is the direct out-of-pocket costs. Because if you look at the whole triangle, the total cost of training in your organization is at least 3 to 5x what you think your direct cost is. And if you manage the total, I suggest that you make very different decisions than if you manage the small triangle. So it's important to understand what the elements of direct and indirect cost are, what the amount is, and what's the makeup of that cost so that you can make the right kinds of decisions to get those costs to acceptable levels, again, based on the value you're delivering. Some of you have probably seen this chart from Running Training Like a Business. This is called the Camel Chart because it had that little hump in the middle. And this was a methodology or a model developed at DuPont back in the early 90s. And we applied it to training. And what it says is the value chain of training is the horizontal axis, the elements of the value chain, and the vertical chain is the value add, low, medium, high. Value add was defined as an external customer. Your customer's customer is willing to pay for something in the price of your product or service to them. And so what we suggest is when you look at training organizations and where you have your resources deployed and your money spent, it normally comes out in the inverse of the value add. So the stuff where we put resources and dollars against, or pounds against, is on the low value-added activities, and we're not spending enough on the high value-added activities and paying attention to those. And that's one of the root causes for this investment value problem we have. Our friend Tom Hilbert, where's Tom? So our friend Tom put together a model that we really love. You know, you see some question marks in the 4 quadrants, but basically what he says is you need to think about your portfolio in kind of 4 different ways. How much of it is focused on running the business? How much of it is focused on advancing the strategy? How much of it do you buy from the outside off the shelf, or it's generic? How much do you develop inside, which is proprietary? And there's, you know, and for each business, these percentages are likely different. So if you're a 100-year-old manufacturing company growing at 1% a year and don't have any aspirations to grow beyond that, you probably are going to have most of your investment on the left side. But if you're a high-tech, double the business in 5 years kind of company, you're probably going to have to figure out how much investment to put on the right side to advance that strategy. And then determine the mix of off-the-shelf, third-party versus custom-developed stuff. So let me offer up a couple transformation must-dos. This actually came from some work that Alan and CorpU did for us a couple years ago, trying to define what it's going to take to successfully run training like a business, which we think is a transformative concept. Okay? So let me walk through these real quick. The first is we need, all of us, we need to run at the speed of business, not the speed of training. The speed of training is too slow. The fact that businesses are changing daily, weekly, monthly, and we think we put a training plan together at the beginning of the year that's still relevant 3 months into the year is just, you know, crazy. It can't be relevant when the business has changed as it has changed so dramatically. So we need to run at the speed of business. In fact, we need to be in front of the business, actually. So that means we have to get engaged with them. We have to walk in their shoes. We have to walk the halls with them. We have to have conversations with them, and so on and so forth. The second must-do is we need to be lean and agile. That means we can't have, you know, resources sitting around waiting for work. We can't. We have to variabilize our costs. We have to be able to scale up and down as their business needs scale up and down, and we have to be fast. The third must-do is to ensure a laser focus on the business. We need to be laser beamed on what it is they are challenged with, what objectives they have, and how we're going to support that with learning. So we have to figure out what the people component is of those objectives and challenges, and then translate whether learning can be an enabler to address those things. And then, of course, once we do it, we have to prove that we did it. So we have to have the analytics support to demonstrate the value, because the value means we get investment. The value means we build confidence. The value means when we build enough confidence, we can stop measuring, because people are confident when they invest in us, they're going to get, you know, enough value back. Then we can just spend that time that we used to spend measuring doing more value creation. And lastly, you know, the word of the day is driving innovation. All of us need to be more innovative. You read everything you read in the marketplace, and all the literature says innovation is just a necessary. It's not optional anymore. We have to innovate. So, those are the must-dos. Let me just offer up some, what I call some no-brainers, you know, as part of elements of transformation. If you don't have them today, get yourself some relationship managers. Get yourself the people, or business engagement managers, whatever you want to call them. The role that requires that you engage with the business on a daily basis, that you understand their needs, that you try to figure out how training can be an enabler to help them satisfy their needs, and so on and so forth. Optimize the training that's delivered by outside providers in your organization. It's not unusual for us to talk to a company that has 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 third-party training providers that they're using. It's just crazy. It's just crazy, knowing that they have 25 programs that do the same thing from 25 different vendors. And they're paying premium fees for each one of those vendors. You're getting no leverage. And you're getting no consistency, because doing sales training with one vendor and sales training with another vendor, they're going to do different things. Is that good for your business? Likely not. Dramatically reduce your fixed costs. You've heard me talk about this before. Variable cost is a big deal. Business people don't like allocations. They like to pay for what they use, just like we like to pay for what we use when we go to the store. And lastly, measure what matters. And what that means is you don't have to measure everything. You know, there's stuff whose value gets created because the need got started somewhere else and someone put a value on it, and we're simply an enabler. But where we have a unique solution for a unique challenge, we need to figure out how to measure the value that we create. And lastly, utilize outsourcing as a strategic lever to get access to people and capabilities that you don't have, can't afford to build, don't want to build. That you can variabilize your cost with outside providers like NIIT. You can reduce your unit cost, which is critically important. And lastly, you can gain the scalability that you need to be flexible and lean and agile. So, why do I think transformation is important? Let me just offer some thoughts. It's not an option today. We must transform. We must figure out what our customers expect from us and how we're doing against those expectations. And if we're coming up short, then our agenda should be transformation. We must fix this broken investment value equation. We got to make certain that value coming out the back end is a multiple of the investment being made, because business executives, again, have a choice where they're going to put their money. If they don't see a sufficient return in what we do, they're going to put it somewhere else. And we're going to be, again, first on the chopping block. Lastly, move fixed cost to variable costs wherever possible. And then the fourth thing here is, you don't you don't like being first on the chopping block when things get tough. That's good enough reason in my mind to figure out how to do things differently. I think it's really important to understand that if you don't do something, you're not going to like the answer that comes to you at some point in time in the future. Because someone's going to tell you what you're going to do, and therefore you don't have a say in it at that point. I think the bar keeps getting higher for all of us year on year, which means that if we don't do it now, it's going to be a lot tougher next year and increasingly more tough the following year. And lastly, I think our companies expect it of us. They don't want us to sit back and wait to be told. They want us to take the ball, to come up with ideas, to bring bold solutions and ideas to them, to take them to new levels. So, that's all I have to say. Any questions? Am I out of time? Wow. We're turning back time, huh? So what questions do you have? Yeah? No? Thought you had a question there. Okay. Which one?
The value chart.
The Camel Chart?
No, yes.
Where is it?
It's okay. I just wanted to be clear. So you had the value coming down where
Yeah.
there was investment in design and development.
Yeah.
And so are you saying, is your theory that we're not getting the value we need from D&D?
No. What that says is that in the value chain of training,
Yep.
for you, the research we did in running training like a business, we determined, based on customer input, not training input, customer input, that design and development for you as an organization inside a corporate organization, design and development was a low value added activity.
Interesting.
Understanding the needs of the business, high value add. Doing administration, back office stuff, low value add.
Yeah.
But then, when you look at those, if you consider that and look
Yeah.
at where you have your people and money invested, that's where it is high. And so it says, you have a focus, all your focus is on low value added activities, and you're giving up the high value added activities. You're not doing them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's interesting. I could see D&D very much as a strategic lever. Yeah, so if you focus it in the
Understanding
right
the need is a
Yeah.
strategic lever.
Yeah.
The reason there are
activity of-
thousands
I
and
get it.
thousands of
Yeah.
design and development companies out there
Yeah.
is because people have concluded that they can get that work done elsewhere. They don't have to do it
They don't.
themselves.
Understood.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes. Maduri?
The need to run at the speed of business. In that hurry, I think the piece that really doesn't get the attention is the measurement piece,
Yeah.
right? Defining what success would look like and then defining what are the KPIs necessary and how we're going to measure them throughout the journey is always the last piece on everybody's mind.
Yeah.
So in your experience, how can you, are there any guiding principles around that? How do you make the case for measurement right up front so that we're not then chasing it later?
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts about it. One is, you're exactly right. I think what we do traditionally is we take on an activity, and then at the end we start looking for a measure, and that's too late because we never find it. So I think it's critically important that you have the conversation up front to understand from whoever it is you're trying to provide a solution to how they are going to measure the value from the investment they're going to make. They have to define the metrics. And, you know, and not only does that help you define metrics and give you a target to look for results for, but it also gives you an opportunity to say, hey, that doesn't sound like a good investment. If that's all you're expecting out of this, maybe you ought to do it some other way. You know, training isn't the answer for you. It's not the best answer. So I think that's the first thing. Have the conversation before you put pen to paper, you know, and you know, kind of have a contract with your customer that says, this is what you want, this is how we're going to measure it, this is what you're going to do, this is what we're going to do. Okay? Second thing is, and we said this in Running Training Like a Business, the secret to measurement is to create enough measurement activities to build confidence in your customers that when they invest, they're getting value. Just like they feel about things like advertising and marketing and things like that, right? And research and development. Once you achieve that, then you don't have to worry about measurement anymore because they're confident that they're getting value. You know, then you can go off and just do the best work you can, right? Still have the conversation, of course. Still have that conversation because that conversation at the beginning is what guides you. But spending lots of time and energy and money measuring then becomes secondary to the fact that they're confident. Okay?
But then the lag is the business value.
Yeah.
And which takes time to achieve
Yeah.
and to recognize and realize. And nobody seems to have the patience for that.
Well,
right?
you know, it's all about expectation setting,
Yeah.
right? Set the expectation, just like they do with their customers, you know? Set the expectation that this is what it's going to take, and, you know, and so come back at me if I haven't delivered by that time. But until then, give me a chance to help you understand the value you're
Right.
getting from this investment.
Right. Thanks.
I think it's a very compelling story, the running learning as a business and the way you're describing sort of the aspiration of where we need to go. I think if you compare that to the reality of most people, where we can't even today tell exactly how many dollars as a company we're spending, we can't yet basically get our arms around all of the learning activities and say that we control that in one place. If you're thinking about the credibility today of learning, or maybe broader HR with business leaders that you were describing, I thought was realistic. So if you take the reality of where we are today, then we're quite a bit from this aspirational picture that you're describing. I think what would be helpful if you could describe where would you start? Where the hell would you start?
Yeah,
Because it's all very nice to have an ambition of running a marathon, but can't finish the 5K.
yeah.
Then you'd better get training on the 5K and then 10K and etc. So could you help in describing what would be the staircase? Where would you start? If you're just a learning professional, you're an organization, you're starting from where you are today, and I've mentioned a few.
So I'll give you the Running Training Like a Business story. It's a 5-step process.
Okay,
Understand where you are, first step. You know, what are you doing with your people, processes, technology, customer satisfaction, results, infrastructure, whatever, all the elements of training. Understand the current state in great detail. Second step is, what should the future state look like? And create that from your customer in, okay? So create that from your customer in. Understand their expectations, understand how they expect training to work for them and their business, understand what they think is the important stuff that we ought to be working on, and that creates then a future state. Now you have a gap between the two, current and future. Look at the options that you have available to you to close the gap, the gaps. And there will be multiple options, right? But identify those options. Fourth step is build a business case for those options so that you know which is the best option that delivers the most value. And then the last is, implement it. And one of the stories we tell in running training like a business is McDonald's never opens a restaurant until the French fryer is frying. And so to your point, when you start talking about a future state, you create an expectation in your customers, and they get impatient. So you got to make certain that you've moderated their expectations so that they know that when you start up this transformed state, it's going to work. And you're not going to start it up too early, where you have early failures and lose the support and the confidence of the business. So take a look at the book, if you have it, and read the 5-step process and give me a call. Any other questions? Celeste, you had a comment?
Hi, it's Chantal from Puma Energy.
Hi.
I know we chatted a bit last night, but in terms of your 5-step process, for me it's very interesting that if we have a lean training team, and often today business has a lean organization in any aspect, my question is around if we have a look at start with the end in mind, which is typically our ROI measurement. If we don't have all of that, so for example, the HR function, often that is outsourced or it is very lean, and we don't have role profiles, we don't have all of that to measure from. Typically, when you're moving fast, you're trying to get the business going, you're trying to measure those gaps, you're typically putting a plaster on a saw. How would you, obviously we've got our 5 steps, but sometimes we can't go through each of those 5 steps to reach that end goal. In your experience, how have you worked around that to get to that end goal?
Yeah, so the 5 steps are 5 steps to transform a learning organization, not a subset that is about a particular need and how it gets satisfied. So this is a 5-step transformation process for the capability, the learning capability inside the company. As you work on things that your customers want, the first step is always understand what their need is. Understand what the challenge is. Understand what the people component of that need is and how you can, in fact, have an impact on the people component. And then start talking about, if we do this really well, what do you expect from it? And how are we going to measure it together?
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to react to Jack's point on, some starting points. And in my experience, what I've seen organizations do is take steps in 2 directions. One is to look at the learning organization itself. And, especially large global multinational companies, till date, run very large decentralized learning organizations. And by inherent nature of those organizations, it's very hard to drive transformation. So I've seen many organizations, especially in the recent, I would say 2 to 3 years, take a fundamental hard look because, all the data shows that a heavily decentralized learning organization definitely comes in the way of driving learning transformation. So I think that's one dimension. The other dimension that I've seen a lot of you and a lot of other organizations look at is have a very close, hard look at the learning offer itself. What is it that we are delivering to our customers? What's our portfolio? What's our product? And almost think of it as a business who has products to sell. And which ones of them are customers buying more? Are they the right sized? Are they, meeting the needs of the business? So I think 2 fundamental initiatives could be, and what I've seen a lot is organizations taking a very close look at their portfolio or their product, and then really looking at the learning organization itself. Because the way you are organized, a lot of times that determines the value that you can deliver to the business. So are you organized for value creation is sometimes a very fundamental first step.
Any other thoughts, questions? Yes.
So I may be in a unique spot, maybe not, I'm not sure, but in my organization, I run an extremely lean training organization. We're a company of about 17 billion, and I think we have less than 10 people devoted to training.
That's lean.
It's quite lean. And so my question is, the great part is, well, we got the lean part done, right? But my question is, a transformation like this, transforming the learning organization takes investment because I already don't have time to do my 3 jobs. So to put together business cases and
Yeah.
have these conversations and communicate the transformation and all of the things that are involved would require an investment from my business to provide resources for that. So I'm curious if you have any tips.
Yeah,
with
so let me
regard
ask
to
you a question. You have 10 people. Is that all the training that gets designed and developed and delivered in your company?
No, but
Okay,
it's
there you
pretty-
go. That's
not,
the first
not
question.
far off.
That's the first part of the business
Sure.
case, right? So find out what all's going on. I think you'll be surprised that it's a lot more than you think. The second thing is look at that total cost thing. You know, all of this is heading toward building a strong business case. Then you'll get the investment. Because if you build a strong business case, you know, investment comes. So that's what I would encourage you to think through. And how would you go about gathering all the data to find out all the places where people are spending time and money and effort doing what you think you're doing, but them doing it also, you know? And get your arms around all that. Pull it in and say, look, this doesn't make sense for us, you know?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is, just to speak to that, is our organization having gone through a large business transformation about 2 years ago. We have not been devoting time or resources to training,
Yeah.
you know, broadly. I'm not saying it's not happening out there. Of course it is. People
Right.
get new jobs all the time, right?
Right.
They have to learn their
Right.
job. But that's one of the things, is the organization screaming out for more, and we're saying, okay, but you know, we want to do it strategically and being cost efficient and all these lovely things that we've talked about. So.
Yeah, I mean, here's what you probably know. If it's essential to the business, they're doing it. Right? They're
Right.
doing it. Whatever form it takes, they're doing training that's essential to business. So the big question becomes on what I would call the discretionary training and the value, the potential value that it can deliver. And that's where you really need to demonstrate that you can do that, and you can realize some big return at the end, you know?
Great.
Anything else? I think I'm out of time. Thank you.